let's go ahead and start with the commit from yesterday. I don't think it was a surprise. In fact, I think it would be quite a surprise if it went the other way, just where things had been going. But Mario Buford, of course, brother of Marquise Buford, commits to Nebraska out of Texas. Another one out of Texas. What is Nebraska looking for in Mario Buford, and what is kind of the trajectory, I guess, of him when he gets to it?
Yeah, he did his best to kind of give everybody the big fake yesterday, peeling off the DeSoto shirt, and all of a sudden he had an Oregon shirt, he flashed the big O, and then he peeled that off, and it was kind of a Nebraska shirt that kind of had like the markings like up on the chest, and you couldn't really read it very well, and then he grabbed the Nebraska hat and put it on. So I have to admit, my heart skipped a beat just for a minute seeing that happen like that, because Mario Buford is incredibly important to this class. He was obviously in for an official visit weekend last weekend. This was his sixth visit overall. His sixth visit was an official visit. And it was really a group of, a lot of defensive backs. You had William Nettles, Peyton Morgan, and Amari Sanders, and Dante Carter. You had all those guys coming in. There were 3 or 4 guys from the state of Texas alone that they had coming in, last weekend. And I think Nebraska really would like to kind of tie things up and kind of finish things out when it comes to their secondary class. And Buford is really important for that overall picture, because they're not really recruiting Buford differently than like Peyton Morgan or Dante Carter. If you talk to Carter, or you read my comments about Carter or Morgan, Nebraska is telling them it's defensive back. It's not cornerback. It's not safety. It's not nickel. It's not dime. You are going to play defensive back, which means you're going to move between various positions, and we're going to try to find ways to keep you on the football field. And I think ultimately that's kind of a two-pronged thing. Number one, you don't have to make all those personnel adjustments because you got guys that have the ability to kind of move freely between spots and just kind of, they've got that kind of athleticism and they understand the scheme. They should be able to do all that stuff. And I think number two, and this is probably the really important part, when it comes to professionals coming in the NFL and they want to evaluate the talent of a player, they'll have to go back and look at a defensive back and figure out, hey, he's, a really good player, really good athlete. Don't really see him, doing much beyond playing nickel, or really more of a true safety. And not having that ability to be multiple and have all the, that ability to kind of roll between positions, I think does hurt their stock, unless you're really more of like a lockdown boundary guy, which I think Buford has a little bit of that in him. He's at 11 and a half. Cornerback. He's got a 75.5-inch wingspan, so he's going to play even taller than his nearly 6-foot frame. And I think that's one of the big reasons why he's just got to be a cornerstone, in the 2024 class for the defensive part of the class. That was a guy that Nebraska could not afford to miss on. They just don't have a lot of those other guys like that. And plus, this is the 4th Texas commitment in the 2024 class, and that's half of the entire class right now is from Texas. So pretty amazing how we've shifted gears and seen more players from the state of Texas already under basketball.
With him being, one of the bigger names in the 2024 class and getting him in the boat, having him doing some pure recruiting, I'm not saying, in the next week or two, but in the near future, should we expect or should we be ready to see maybe a few more people jump in the boat for Nebraska?
Absolutely. I think that this, you've got Roger Gradney in the class, and I've got some thoughts I'm kind of holding on to about Gradney until Tunnel Talk next week. But with Buford, it was a really important weekend to get all those defensive backs together in Lincoln, and all of those guys acknowledged his commitment to Nebraska. And that was one of the things that, as you follow and you kind of turn your notifications on, with Carter and Morgan and Nettles, they were all acknowledging Buford jumping class. So this is one of those things now where I think, Nebraska called their shot, probably told most of them, hey, look, this is our group. This is the group that we want. You can go ahead and get into the class and kind of get us to shut down shop. And I think that all of them, got a chance really to get to know each other, hang out a bunch. I think that they know, obviously, that Mario has an older brother up there. and it doesn't hurt that all those guys are from the state of Texas as well. So I do think that there's going to be some positive things coming here in the coming weeks. I think really leading up to that big official visit weekend on the 23rd, and then you'll obviously see those positive things continue to happen into the month of July.
Is there a position that Nebraska is kind of circling, or people should look for, that Nebraska really needs to get in this class? I mean, sometimes we kind of have that, and just with the corners, I know, they signed 4 in the class last year. Obviously, you're talking about corners and getting another haul of them here. Is there such thing as too many corners, or is there are there certain positions you wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of work toward in this class?
Well, let me see here. Well, I think that the linebacker position's interesting, obviously. I think it's going to be a light number. I think it a lot has to do with the fact that you're going from a 3-4 to a 3-3-5. So you have a little bit less of a number, particularly at that middle linebacker spot. You've already got a guy like Willis McGahee that's already in, but he's more of a jack linebacker, so kind of opposite that edge or that guy that's going to be either working between the 2-point or 3-point. But I think really that Mike spot. I think that they're looking for one, but I don't think that there's a need to kind of overdo that. And I think a lot of that just kind of is the change of the scheme. I think that they want to get some more edge guys. They're still looking for interior guys like Carlin Jones, and they had Joseph Anderson last week. And obviously they're looking for several tight ends in the class, and I think that that's going to maybe potentially impact, maybe the overall size of the group, when it comes to wide receiver. It's going to be interesting how they kind of put all this map together, because, it shouldn't be a class that really gets up much past, 20. But right now you're sitting at 8. And let's think about all the positions that we just talked about, that they potentially want to add to this group. It's going to fill up very quickly. And I think we're going to have to, hit some sort of a pause button at some point to kind of figure out, who else they're going to be kind of waiting on. You have those 2 offensive linemen coming in from Utah for the Michigan game later in September. It's going to be interesting how many of those guys want to kind of push out their business, because they've already seen Nebraska and they want to see Nebraska for a game day weekend. So I think middle linebacker is a good spot where you can say, like, the number's going to be relatively low, and I think it has a lot to do with just the change in the alignment.
Now, another kind of thought here with last weekend, you already have the success of Buford committing. So a good weekend of with that haul that was here last week. And of course, I know that they have the 23rd kind of circled as their big weekend here in June. Is there anything kind of in between those dates, or is that kind of the time that they're bringing in most of the players to visit?
Yeah, you got a couple really big official visitors to start out next week. I mean, obviously this is a big camp weekend. You've really got no official visitors this weekend. Nebraska is going to be out there with the camp guys, and starting on like Monday and Tuesday next week, you have maybe 2 of their top offensive linemen, coming in next week as for midday visits. You had Caden Massey from Kansas, who's a big-time offensive tackle, and you have Cohen Eccles from Texas, another offensive lineman from another player from the state of Texas. That'll be up there in Lincoln this weekend as well, and this will be his second time up there in Lincoln. I think he was up there for the spring game and picked up the offer then, and he actually went from kind of a below-the-radar guy to really popular once the Nebraska offer had come in. I think the very next day, after he picked up Nebraska, he picked up U&M and Houston, and I think Ole Miss followed suit as well. So I think that obviously you've got to pay attention to those 2 guys. And the camp and the visitors leader, that's out of the camp. I would look maybe, try to watch those 2025 and 2026 guys. I think Nebraska really wants to figure out what's kind of going on in the area over the next 2 years when it comes to recruiting. I think that's the part that maybe they're still trying to get their arms around when it comes to kind of still getting up to speed and considering themselves, caught up when it comes to recruiting.
Now, we did say, too, and I kind of wanted to ask you about maybe the California presence overall, because we saw yesterday the Big Ten scheduling format Iowa the only permanent crossover. There was some talk about maybe, a UCLA or USC joining the fold. Maybe they would be a permanent crossover for Nebraska, which, naturally you would kind of think would open up some avenues in California. Now they are heading to UCLA, the Rose Bowl in 2024, doing the same thing at the Coliseum in 2025. So they're going to start having more of a presence, obviously, in California, one way or the other. But do you think it would have been beneficial for Nebraska to have an annual trip there, or are you think Nebraska's pretty happy with where things landed?
Yeah, I think Nebraska has to be pretty happy with where things landed. I mean, obviously, the Big Ten extending their footprint in California is going to carry with it some positives for all the programs because, obviously you hear some of those regular complaints about how, half the nation has gone to sleep by the time the Pac-12 schools are kind of kicking off. You don't have that kind of same problem when you're kind of slotted into a Big Ten network game. So it's going to help out. And obviously, when you start talking about the Big Ten footprint, just kind of moving out there a little bit more when it comes to those games regularly out there in Pasadena, or UCLA. In Nebraska, I mean, really quickly, obviously Nebraska is hoping to kind of parlay California teams, but they also really want to do well in recruiting. And Nebraska's actually done fairly well in recruiting when it comes to California. They've been able to grab some fairly significant guys and get them to Lincoln, on their own dime for unofficial visits. Aiden Freeland and Brandon Baker and Nate Frazier. A lot of guys that were like the top players at their own position. And there are guys that are from the market of Los Angeles that they don't want to stick around. They don't plan on going to USC or UCLA. They want to leave the state or they want to go someplace else. I don't think Lincoln Riley or Chip Kelly can keep them all home. And I think Nebraska and the rest of the Ten are really happy about that. And they want to go in there and try to find ways to keep them in the Big Ten.
One final question for you too. I know they have they're kind of involved in satellite camps again this year, which it's kind of been on and off. What's kind of changed about satellite camps from kind of the Jim Harbaugh? It was like I don't know 10 years ago. I don't even know how long ago it was now. 8 years ago, whatever. When satellite camps were kind of this new big deal, and Jim Harbaugh was taking advantage of it more than anybody else. Are satellite camps still kind of at that level, or what kind of changed about the viewing on those?
Well, I think it really comes down to sometimes to preference. It is costly. It's expensive to kind of have to do it. I think what really matters is that you're getting the value out of it. And I think what people have to understand about Matt Rule and his staff, going to a satellite camp, Nebraska has a unique way of kind of promoting themselves by putting that coaching staff into an area where the coaches of that school, the coaches of the local high schools, and the players of that area, don't necessarily get a chance to meet and talk to those guys. I mean, I think Nebraska has obviously been very active in Texas, but this last week when they were in Belton, which is kind of south of Waco, between Waco and Austin, and then they were at Houston Christian. They had a great opportunity to kind of get out there. They made some offers, and I think that just overall, people that I had talked to, whether it was just the people that were picking up offers or talking to Sean and Steve Sipple about things, the way that they are, the way that they kind of handled themselves, the way that they were, the way that everybody else was kind of talking to them or how they spoke about them there, it's really a great way to sell Matt Rule in Nebraska, in Texas, to have them get out there and have those types of opportunities. I know that there's another mega camp coming up. I think it's in Philadelphia. And they'll take part in that one too. It wouldn't be as big as the ones that were just this last week. But I think it's one of those things that Nebraska has to keep in mind, maybe try to double down on here a little bit. You got the in Lindenwood, Missouri. There's a big mega out there at Abilene Christian. There's another one, big one on the east side of Dallas at Texas A&M Commerce. There's some really good opportunities, I think, to get into some nice areas where Nebraska would have not just an opportunity to see some guys they wouldn't typically see, but they can obviously promote themselves as coming off as being one of the more genuine stats around the team.
Absolutely. Fantastic stuff from Bryan Munson of Husker Online and on 3. Thank you for our weekly visit. As we always say, always entertaining, always informative. Thanks, Bryan.
Have a great weekend, guys. We'll see you.
All right, there he goes. Bryan Munson of Husker Online and on 3. Always great to get caught up in the latest in recruiting.